And now for the fun part of the show. Q&A session. With yours truly, Evan.
So as I was explaining with Jonas, I am starting this YouTube channel where I get to discuss some really deep questions and some pressing issues. So I would love to hear from you guys. What are some of those questions that keep you up at night or that you've heard that you just haven't had the answer to? I don't claim to know everything, but I've read some things, I've researched some stuff, and I have a knack for quickly giving a response to things. So if you guys have any questions you would like me to address, either now or in a future video, I'd love to hear them. If anything is on you guys' mind.
Mine is the light.
Sure.
I have a question. Why do you think God lets wars happen?
Ooh, why does God let war happen? We're jumping right into the deep stuff. It's great. That kind of relates all the way back to what philosophers call the problem of evil. Not just war, but why does any kind of evil or badness exist? And why does any kind of death or problem exist in the world? And that has really to do with his plan and what's going on, and his character. So God, in his love, decided to give people free will, and that's what we read about in Genesis, when Adam and Eve decide to make a different decision than what he planned. Now, did God desire that? No. Did God allow it? Yes. So what we can know is there is a purpose for it. I don't think that God is sitting up in heaven and telling each country, you go to war there, you go to war there, and causing an ever's death. But I think he is allowing it for a purpose that somehow ultimately glorifies him. There's a few different philosophers that talk about that. There's a guy named Leibniz who believes that we live in the best of all possible universes. So to relate your question all the way to maybe specifically World War II, why Hitler, right? Why couldn't God stop Hitler? Well, what Leibniz would say is if he stopped Hitler, maybe Stalin would have been even worse, or maybe something else worse would have happened. So we can trust that because God is good, he is only going to allow the greatest amount of good. So that's my perspective on it. There's plenty of other philosophers that you can read on that issue, but the problem of evil is so important. If you're further interested, I would recommend looking at The Problem of Pain by C.S. Lewis. But if you want a more in-depth and succinct answer, check out my YouTube channel, Matter of Truth. Press subscribe because that is absolutely one question I will be answering in the future. Thank you so much for that question.
If it was possible to know that other people were not conscious, would that affect how you live your life?
If it was
This is a matter of opinion, maybe. But to know that other people were not actually sentient or conscious.
Okay, so what you're talking about is, let's imagine that you all aren't exactly real. It's just my consciousness being projected. Okay, yeah, that goes back to Descartes' philosophy. Rene Descartes, the father of Western philosophy, he believed, or he at least understood it was possible, that maybe he was living in the Matrix, that some evil demon was deceiving his brain. He's like, and how can I know any of you guys are real or anything is true at all? But what he does realize is, if I know I am something, then if I am thinking, then I know I must be existing. So something must exist, and I have no reason to reject anything quite yet. Now, what if we are living in the Matrix? How does that affect our lives? If it is going to affect my life, I'm going to need some pretty heavy evidence to believe it. So because I don't have evidence to believe that, I don't think it should affect how I interact with those who may or may not be sentient. So because I don't have evidence to the contrary, I'm going to continue to assume you are sentient, whether or not you are, and treat you as I would want to be treated.
On a less serious note, did Adam have a belly button?
Did Adam have a belly button? That's I haven't gotten that one before. That's great. I don't know. It's hard to say for sure, but it depends on, and actually goes back to your theory of creation. So some people say the reason why the earth looks old, even though some people think it's young, is because God designed it that way. God designed it with that sort of, it looks like it was formed from the past. So it's very possible that Adam was in fact formed that way, where although he did not actually have an umbilical cord because he was not born, very possible that God did design him with a belly button because that's how he planned to design everybody. But it's also possible, on the contrary, that if he was not born and that just kind of made things functionally, that maybe he didn't. It's very possible either way, and the way you answer that question actually has a lot to do with the way you understand creation. So, excellent question. That was great.
So where does like a giraffe's tongue start?
Where does a giraffe's tongue start?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent question. A little bit outside of my field of expertise, but I'll give it a chance. I had heard, and I may be wrong with this, but I've heard that it's actually an extremely long tongue. tongue that goes really far back. I'm not sure how far or how it's supposed to work. I've also heard that it actually wraps around or woodpeckers. Woodpeckers have a tongue that wraps around their brain to protect it while they're hitting the tree. So really interesting biological setups here. But some people have actually used a giraffe's tongue and actually a special nerve in their neck that is around their tongue to say, well, God doesn't exist because that's super inefficient. Why would something that tall have a really long neck? Why would God design it that way? That seems really inefficient. Well, that actually has to do with an issue of presupposition here. That is the least efficient way to design a giraffe or his tongue or his nerves. We are not sure everything that goes into the biology of a giraffe quite yet. We're still understanding all of science, so we can't definitively say whether that's evidence against God or not. And because I have a lot of evidence to believe in God, I'm still going to think that a giraffe's tongue is designed the best way possible, even if I don't understand it. Excellent question. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, one in the back here.
I have a two-part question.
Okay.
Is
My
rock the best music genre, and is music today getting worse? Is it degrading?
Oh, excellent question. So is rock the best music genre, and is music actually getting worse? Wonderful question that has to do with subjectivity and our opinions and our tastes. Personally, I do believe rock is the best. I really enjoy it. It uses all kinds of different influences, instruments, but that isn't to disregard any other style of music, really great music out there, and that is all entirely a matter of preference. However, what's not a matter of preference is music degrading? Because we have to have standards of art, right? David Hume is a philosopher that kind of takes a lot of flack in Christian circles because he was an atheist, but he had a lot to say about why we value what we do and what makes art good. And things that he talked about were the time that it takes, the understanding that's put in there, and the actual design that it has. So is music getting worse? That depends on your standard. Are you talking lyrically, or are you talking technologically? Because technologically, we're advancing. We're figuring out really interesting and unique ways to mix old and new music and instruments and technology, some entirely on the computer, some disregard computers, some do both. Lyrically, I see evidence like, somebody will quote Frank Sinatra, and somebody will quote Justin Bieber and say, see, music's getting worse. However, there were the Justin Biebers of Frank Sinatra's day, they just weren't as popular. Justin Bieber got really viral really quickly, and we can't use Justin Bieber as a full representation of today's music. I think today's music is actually in an interesting way because also the moral quality needs to be judged. We hear a lot of stuff about, today's music, that's all trash, they sing about terrible things, but have you listened to some of the bands that your parents listened to? I mean, Van Halen's Hot for Teacher wasn't exactly subtle, am I right? But today's music is a really interesting way where we are talking about more edgy themes, but we're doing it in an interesting, tasteful way. So while I can't say for sure whether music is getting better or not, there are definitely important things to consider philosophically when it comes to what we listen to. Which reminds me, I think we also need to be careful about the kind of music we're listening to. The Wesley brothers, famous for the Wesleyan tradition, they wrote hymns to teach things because music they found was better at teaching than preaching was. And most of the congregations built their theologies off of the worship music they heard more than they did their sermons. So that shows something a little bit about how we as people get new information. And when it comes in songs and art, sometimes we take it a lot more passively and we don't realize how much it's influencing us. So I really encourage you guys, take a critical look at the kind of music you're listening to and really understand the lyrics because it influences your worldview in a way that sometimes we're not even aware of. So I know I kind of tangented off there, but that was a great question. Thank you so much. Another question, excellent.
Yeah, so I know that you're very well educated and just a really deep thinker, so I was wondering what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Chicken or the egg, that's great. I talked about doing debate here at Liberty. I actually had a debate with one of my good friends in high school. It was in a formal round about the chicken or the egg. And again, that comes back to the philosophy of how things develop and how things are created. Did God make something fully formed already, or did he prepare it and raise it kind of himself? As a creationist, I think a chicken has to come first, personally, because what's there to protect the egg, what's there to continue to grow the egg, I don't think that makes sense for that to happen unnaturally. However, if you're going to take a maybe theistic evolution kind of side, you could say, well, birds came from a past life form which included eggs, so then we get into some confusing territory. So as someone who believes in a pure God's word creation, I think the chicken has to come first in that scenario, but it's a really fun idea to wrestle with, and that chicken and egg problem comes up in other aspects of life. So that's an excellent question. Excellent question, if you see what I did there. Yes, yeah. We have some over the front and one in the back. Yes, what's up?
Do you believe Jesus was jacked?
Do I believe Jesus was jacked? 100%. Absolutely. I love that question. Jesus was jacked. I have a few reasons for that. Number one, he was a carpenter, which actually, carpenter in the time of the biblical times, they didn't work with wood very well, yet they had to discover like the efficient woodworking tools we have. So carpenter is actually better translated as a mason. He was a stoneworker. And if you've ever seen anybody who's actually a stoneworker, meaning they take the granite blocks and take them into what we use today, they gotta be pretty strong to use a chisel and an axe in that way. So yes, Jesus was jacked historically, but also philosophically, if Jesus was the perfect man, the ideal human, then he took care of his body very well. Because it is a spiritual matter how well we take care of our bodies. It's sinful to neglect ourselves. So if Jesus did not commit any sin and he was the perfect man, then yes, he was fully jacked because he took care of himself very well and had a job that lent itself to that. So excellent question. I love that. Awesome. We have another one this way.
Do you think there's an objective standard of what defines good, independent of God? And if not, how do you know that God is good?
Wow. Yeah, that is a loaded question. I love it. So you're asking, is there an objective standard outside of God? And if there is not, how do we know that God is good? Is that right? Okay, so what you asked is actually a question that was asked literally thousands of years ago by one of my favorite philosophers, Socrates. This is what's called the youth-betrothal dilemma. So the story goes like this. Socrates was passing a guy on his way to the courthouse. He was going to sue his friend. And the guy was so indignant about his friend doing such wrong things, and it's good to demand justice. And Socrates goes, well, what is good? He's like, well, the gods demand justice. And he says, well, is it good because the gods call it good? Or do the gods call it good because it is good? What do we have here? It's a chicken and the egg problem. Was it good first, or did the gods call it good first? So in other words, is God our ultimate standard of morality? Or does God have a standard of morality that he identifies? So, that's the first question, is there good outside of God? The trouble with that is if there's a good outside of God, then God ceases to be God because he ceases to be the ultimate authority there. So there has to be a higher standard, something that pre-exists, right? But how can we know God is good if we don't have another standard of good? Well, God is ultimate reality. He is eternal, and he is the standard of all things. So if he is eternal and he is ultimate reality in himself, then his character and nature are what defines what is good. And we know it is good because of our experience and because he is ultimate reality. C.S. Lewis speaks very much to this idea of how can we trust whether God is good or not. Can his good be our good? In the book Problem of Pain, again, highly recommend it. But because God's character and nature is kind of what defines the entire universe, we have to trust that goodness as well as rationality as well as virtue are in the character and nature of God. So, no, I don't think there's a standard of good that can be above God because then he wouldn't be God, but we can trust that God is good because his nature defines the way the universe should work. Hopefully that answers your question. That is a really good question that Western philosophers have wrestled with for centuries. So, great question. Good thinking. Yeah. Any other questions or how much time? We have one of them in front. Excellent. Guys, I love these questions. I love how deeply you think, and hopefully I'm doing a good job giving you somewhat of an answer.
So, going off that deep question,
Sure.
if giraffes could wear pants,
Oh, sweet.
how would they wear them?
Oh, man. That is a tough one. So, are you saying, like, would it be on the hind legs, or would it be like 4 sleeves? Yeah, no, that really does make me think, because we do call them all legs, and pants are what covers the legs. But if they were to wear a shirt, how would that fit? See, that's why I kind of lean towards the hind legs theory, because I've seen this online, it's great. I kind of lean towards the hind legs theory because I'd like to have him fully clothed, so he needs a shirt as well, which that has to go over his front legs. So yeah, giraffes, I think they're going to wear pants. We should put it on the back, so we can really, what's better than a like formally dressed giraffe, maybe in the tuxedo looking shirt? You got to put that in the front, right? So hind legs, yeah.
Where does a giraffe wear its necktie?
Where does a giraffe wear its necktie? Yeah, depends on what I thought about, but at first my immediate reaction was, oh, his neck. And I was like, wait, is it up by his chin? Or is it down low over his chest? Well, the original necktie was designed to be a napkin to wipe the face. I'm not sure if you guys knew that. The necktie itself used to work where you take the end of it and you would dab your cheek after your feet to use as a napkin. So I'm guessing, relating to the tongue question, the fact that it's high and it's upright, I'd say it has to be by its neck. But the problem is, how does he use his legs to get it? I think, have you ever seen giraffes fight? They're really agile with their necks. They really can turn them in really interesting ways. So I feel like he'd wear it in the middle of his neck and then turn his head down here like that. Yeah, I love it. This is a really good time. I've never thought so deeply about giraffes before in my life. But you guys are really, really challenging it, and I love it. I got to study more giraffe biology. That's wonderful.
All right. If you eat at midnight, is it considered dinner or breakfast?
Excellent question. Yeah. Well, have you ever thought of the word breakfast? The etymology of the word breakfast? Well, it's 2 words. It's breaking a fast. That's why we call it breakfast, because you fast after you eat dinner for about 8 hours where you're asleep, and then you break that fast whenever you wake up and have your first meal. So what I would call it depends on how early you ate dinner. Was dinner like 2 hours ago? Then I don't know if I'd call that a breakfast. I don't know if you break the fast, but I think if you had a dinner at a reasonable time at 5 or 6 and it's been 6 hours, you'd call it a fast. I would call it breakfast. Yeah. Great question.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.